The second historical important game that I would like to discuss for this course is the game played between Kasparov and Karpov in 1987 in their World Championship match in Seville. It was the 24th game and Kasparov needed to win this game in order to equalize the match. It was a very interesting match, and at one point I believe that Kasparov was leading by 2 points, but he lost 3 games in a row. So Kasparov was trailing by 1 point and he was now in a must-win situation if he wanted to retain the World Championship title. His decision was very interesting. You might expect him to go for something sharp with 1 e4 or d4, but instead he went for double fianchetto setup. And it was this game that gave these double fianchetto systems a lot more respect, I think. I think grandmasters started to play this way more and more often. Why did Kasparov choose this system? I believe that after d4 or e4 there are so many forcing lines with which you can already exchange quite a lot of pieces, and maybe white gets a small advantage in some long line, but then the advantage will be maybe in some endgame which is easily held to a draw, especially by someone of Karpov's stature. So that's why Kasparov went for a position in which there remained many pieces on the board, and also the tension that slowly built up in this game, which I think favored Kasparov, because as black needing a draw, you just want to have clarified the situation as quickly as possible, but this did not happen, and probably this has also cost Karpov a lot of time on the clock, so that when the position became critical, Karpov did not make the best decisions anymore, and around move 40 he ended up in a very bad endgame. Okay, let us have a look at the game. So c4 was first choice, e6, and now knight f3, knight f6 and g3. So Kasparov and Karpov, they played a lot of queen's gambit declines in the previous matches. So the queen's gambit declines, it goes like this: bishop g5, h6, bishop h4, castle, e3, b6. And actually this position, it happened almost every game in the 1984 match. At a certain point in the match, this was Karpov's main weapon from the start in the match already, but also Kasparov decided to adapt this opening to make a draw with black. So this became almost the starting position in this 1984 match at some point. And of course, it's the positions are very well analyzed, and I'm pretty sure if this would have happened, that Karpov would have made another draw. So therefore, no main lines this time around, but g3, d5, and now not bishop g2, but b3. And this is a position that I will also later discuss, and I will also make a case here for the move d takes c4, b takes c4, followed by e5, which is also discussed in one of the videos on this course, and which was played against me by Joost Wempe, a Dutch FIDE master, and I thought it was very annoying. But it's possible that Karpov did not know about this move, or thought that this was just too double-edged. I think it is very double-edged. The pawn structure is is something you don't usually see, but I believe that these kind of positions are interesting, and probably also, yeah, very playable for black. So d takes for bc4 e5. That one we will discuss a bit later on. So bishop e7 was the choice. Karpov made bishop g2, castle, and here black can choose whether to go c5 or b6, and Karpov chose to wait with the move c5. c5 is possible. I will not delve too deep into the theory here, but c5, the point is that you can then put the knight on c6, and even you could consider the idea of going d5, d4, which leads to Benoni type of structures, and those will also be discussed on this series. So c5 is a very critical move as well here. b6 is definitely very solid. Bishop b2, then bishop b7, e3. Yeah, e3 is a move you see often in this type of positions. White gains more control over the d4 square, but also one of the main points is that this queen that will go to e2. This is a very nice square for the queen. Then white's rook can come to d1, the knight will develop to c3, other rook will go to c1, and then only then white will play d4 often. Some setup like this is very logical. It's not even the only plan. There's also another plan that we will discuss, in which white does not play d4 at all, but puts the pawn on d3. But yeah, that will come all in later videos. So knight d7 was played here, knight c3, and now knight e4. And it was at this moment that I think Kasparov made a very interesting decision, since I think knight e4 is an attempt to already make some exchanges. It would be really nice for black to for example, take on c3 next. That would be nice. Exchange a piece. Also exchange maybe the bishops, and then position becomes maybe slightly better for white, but with already some pieces leaving the board, it's probably also gonna be quite comfortable for black anyway to hold the draw. So again, Kasparov takes a decision with which he keeps as many pieces on the board. Knight e2 is a good move, I think, for considering the match situation. But I do believe that c take d5 does give white some chances for an advantage. Black probably will now take on c3, and then now here white has a choice. Bishop takes c3 is possible. Then after bishop d5, you could play e take d5, I guess, but I think white is just slightly better here. Even after d4, white can play d4, and I think this situation, the pawn on c7 is a bit weak, and once you go c5, white will take on c5, and then black has to choose whether to play with an isolated queen pawn or with hanging pawns. So that should be better for white, slightly better for white. I don't know that d4 immediately is necessary, by the way. We could also go queen c2 makes a lot of sense, and then to go rook c1, rook a c1, and to see what black is going to do. Once black plays c5, you can still go d4. So e take d5. Yeah, I think it's better to keep center fluid like this. Bishop take d5, and yeah, okay. White white plays here queen e2, and then after c5, rook fd1, and queen c7. Okay, this type of position, it is a bit better for white, but black is extremely solid here. There are no weaknesses in black's position. If white goes rook c1, then you could put the queen on b7. And well, this looks very nice, I think, for black. This control of the diagonal. White could go d3, e4, of course, but then, yeah, that's also it's good plan, but it's also not perfect. Yeah, it also comes with some small weaknesses on the dark squares if you go d3, e4. But probably something like that should happen now. And okay, yeah, after d3 there's already bishop f6, and yeah, black's position is maybe a bit worse, but I think quite solid. Also, after knight takes c3, there's another option here. It's to not take with the bishop, but with the pawn. This is probably what I would have played in this case. Then if bishop takes d5, we go c4 and bishop b7, and okay, here. Yeah, probably queen e2, or maybe queen c2. Both are possible. Queen e2 is also possible, of course. But with queen c2, we are setting up a little trap, and that is to go knight c5, since the bishop on b7 is unprotected. And we are threatening mate, so that would give us the pair of bishops. And I think here white is more comfortable. There is a game, Romanov against Master Vasilis, played in 2017, that continued e take d5 from here, and then white went knight d4. And yeah, actually it's a bit unpleasant for black here, because white now has the threat of playing the move knight f5, when we are attacking the pawn on d5 and also hitting the bishop on e7. So that would give black the bishop pair, give white the bishop pair. So knight c5 is a move here, but then white goes c4, and the pin on d5 is somewhat unpleasant. If black, for example, takes on c4, then bishop takes b7, knight b7, and now there's knight c6. When after queen e8, white has already some very unpleasant ideas, like queen g4, and this move is provoking the move f6, which is very weakening. You weaken these squares with such a move, and here white can take on e4 with check, or maybe go queen e6 first. Yeah. I think this position white is better, also because pawn on c7 is backwards, and white's pieces are just more active. So after cd5, white definitely has chances for an advantage, but knight e2, keeping as many pieces on the board and trying to build up the tension, trying to yeah, just keep the tension for later. We want not immediately to have a sharp battle, but we want to delay it. We want to keep the many pieces on the board and hopefully strike when our opponent does not have so much time. a5 was a choice by Karpov, and in a way this is a logical move, since the knight of c3 has now left. For e2, a5, a4 is an idea to attack the white queenside pawns, and yeah, soften a bit the pawn on b3. So let's say a4 and you take on b3, then white will recapture with the pawn probably, and the pawn on b3 is at least attackable, for example with one of the black knights. So yeah, this is definitely a logical idea. Bishop f6 is also makes a lot of sense, but here I think normally Kasparov would have played here the move d4. And now the position looks somewhat like a Catalan, but the pieces are somewhat differently placed. Let's say c5, we go knight f4, and at least white now has a fight. Yeah, it looks like a sharp Catalan. For those of you who do not know, what is the Catalan? It's an opening that I have played a lot in my life, and usually it starts with the moves d4. There are many different move orders to arrive already at this position, but this is the starting position of the Catalan, and one of the main lines, it goes bishop g, like this, bishop g2, castle, castle, and now, well, this is a closed Catalan. Let's say something like b3, b6, rook b1, something like this, knight c3, and well, this is very, very typical Catalan structure. And now the position we are discussing, it is somewhat different, of course. The pieces are differently placed, and I think that already makes white's opening a success here, because it's not so clear black pieces are that well placed. And after knight f4, white has this idea like knight h5, when either, well, we are attacking the bishop on f6, so white could take the bishop pair, and the bishop cannot really go away, since there's also this wonderful bishop on the long diagonal here attacking g7. So yeah, a5 is I think it's an attempt to create more forcing play. So d3, bishop f6 was played. Okay, now the question is, how is d4 here? I thought d4 here. Of course, white has now lost the tempo. But again, our idea is to play knight f4, knight h5. And I think this is also possible to keep pieces on the board. I'm not so sure a4 is that much of a big deal. So d4 is interesting. But queen c2 was Kasparov's choice. Bishop take d2, queen b2. Now knight retreats and went to d6. And to be honest, I'm not sure how good is the knight there. I don't. Karpov is of course an excellent positional player and very good feel for where the pieces should be, but to me it seems that the knight, still somewhat strangely placed here. C take d5, a split, and now again this choice between bishop take d5 and e take d5. So e take d5 would have led to positions where white probably gets to play against hanging pawns. So white will go d4, and now white's play is rather easy. I'm not sure white is really better, but white's play is just much easier, and this is already quite an achievement. So when you are preparing for your opponent and you see maybe evaluations by your computer like 0.00 or maybe even minus 0.1, it's not always that important, I think. What is more important is that you have a position you like and in which you can in which you are comfortable and which you think is easier to play for you than for your opponent. And this is the kind of position maybe Engine gives somewhat around equal, but actually white's play is rather straightforward here. Whereas black already, well, white has a target. The pawn on c7 is the target. So white could double rooks on the c file. There's the idea to go knight e5 at some point, and black just has to figure out, should he play maybe the move f6, but f6 is weakening the e6 square. Should black go c5 here or not? c5 is a playable move, of course, and white will take it, and then after b takes c5, this is the positions that I already mentioned. We are going to play against hanging pawns. I always really like that. One of the things that I think are important to know about hanging pawns is that the more pieces white exchanges, minor pieces especially, the weaker those pawns will get. So white will go rook c1, rook d1, knight f4. Yeah, this looks like the much easier position to play for white here. So bishop d5 by Karpov is very understandable, and here now white play the move d4, which also is, I think, probably the best move in the position. There's also bishop knight f4, when black will go bishop b7, and now knight h5 is an attempt to provoke a weakness. It's an interesting idea. Black has to go f6 here, and then knight will retreat to f4, and queen e7, and okay, maybe it's not 100% clear what white achieved, but okay, it's still yeah, the pawn e6 is a bit soft, I would say. So here also I wouldn't mind playing this position with white, but I think d4 is a bit stronger. c5 was Karpov's move, rook d1, and from this moment on Karpov started to make some inaccurate moves. But the best move might be c4, and c4, that's, considering the match situation, just a very tough move to play. It leads to much sharper positions than Karpov wants at this stage of the match. So knight f4 will be played, and then b5, and here, for example, knight d5. Yeah, there could be other moves as well. For example, a4, but knight d5, e d5, and now knight e5, knight f6, and yeah, it's probably very acceptable position for black, but it's also very sharp. For example, white has this a4 idea, a4, b4, then there's b takes c4, and what should black do? Should black now sacrifice the exchange? I'm not so sure you want to. It's maybe good, but it's also very possible to lose with black. So you see that Karpov wants to play very solidly. He plays a move rook c8, and after knight f4 he decides to give up the bishop. Actually, he already has to give up the bishop, since bishop e4 now. You see that's why the knight on d6 is badly placed. There's d takes e5, and the knight on d6 is now under attack. And after knight takes e5, well, this pin is just very unpleasant. And there's queen e5, and too many of the pieces are hanging. Knight cb7, for example, there's knight h5, when black cannot really do anything against queen takes e7 except for play f6, but then we just take on e6, and this is a complete disaster. So bishop take f3, first bishop take f3, queen e7, and now rook ac1. So why is white better here? Well, first of all, white has a bishop and black a knight, and I believe that bishops in general are better than knights in most positions, and here for sure the bishop is superior to a knight. And also it's maybe not something big, but I think that this pawn structure on the queen side for black is a bit vulnerable, and also black could maybe experience some problems with the square c6. Okay, this is something for the future, but it's possible. If a white knight could come there, that would be unpleasant. Rook f8 was played, and now it's time to really do something with white. D takes c5, knight c5, and now b4. A take b4, and queen b4. And now the pawn on b6 is under attack. Queen a7 is a most obvious choice, since it's not only defending the pawn on b6, it's also attacking the pawn on a2. a3. And now black played knight f5. So you see, black is searching for exchanges, but also Karpov must have realized that the knight on d6 is somewhat badly placed. We constantly have to be defend against the tactics. So knight f5, knight can then later go to e7, maybe if necessary, to cover the c6 square. Anyway, the knight on f5 is defended by a pawn, where on d6 it's defended by a piece. So f5 is just a much safer square. White played rook b1, and yeah, the b6 pawn is weak. Probably the pawn on b6 is a bit weaker than the pawn on a3. So rook take d1, rook d1, and now queen c7. All just very solid. There is, however, also the move queen a5, but then white just manages to keep the tension with rook c1. With idea, white now has the threat of queen take a5, b take a5, and then knight d3, making use of the pin. So not that easy. Probably the black has to go back with the queen a7 or something, and here then white could either go knight d3, and the position is really pleasant for white, because what white can do next is to take on c5, and if black takes with the b pawn, then now we have a very good pawn on a3. It could be well supported by our light square bishop. So queen c7 is probably a better move, and now knight d3. It's probably correct to offer this exchange, since knight take d3, then after rook d3, yeah, the pawn on b6 is a bit weak, and well, white could try to invade. Well, rook b3 is actually a big threat. So let's say if you go here, for example, g6, then let me show you what is the white plan here. White just goes rook b3, and after rook b8, then white has the move a4, and this is a very serious threat. So you see that no matter how slow the positions seemed the first 20 moves, it now is clear that black has anyway some problems and could very easily lose in some ending without any counterplay. Probably what black should do is here play g6, but evaluation doesn't change. White is slightly better and playing for 2 results here for sure. But this was better choice than what Karpov played. Karpov played move a6. So he did not want to play g6. He believed that would be weaken the dark squares too much. But I think this doesn't give the king enough air. White plays rook c1, and now knight e7 was played. But actually this is a mistake, and the knight should have returned to d6. But let's first look at knight d3. This move doesn't work at all. It looks like interesting way to solve the problems, but after rook c7, knight take b4, rook c8 check is obviously losing, so rook takes c7. queen e4, rook c1 check, king g2, knight e1, king h3. And now here you can take on f3, and queen f3, and this position could very well be lost. It's not, the queen is just a very strong piece. Sometimes such positions they can be drawn, but here it's very unlikely that black can get some fortress or something. So knight take d3 doesn't work. Knight d6, it's somewhat difficult to put the knight back on this square, but this time around this knight is much better placed here. Knight e7, probably this was the original intention of Karpov, so he's stuck with that. But after queen b5, knight f5, a4, knight e6, queen b1, queen a7, knight e5. White now has a very large advantage. And actually black's next move should have already cost him the game. He played the move knight take a4. The main line goes queen take a4, and now I have a lot of analysis here. I will not show all of it to you, but after queen take b6, queen a3, rook d1. It looks like things have gone rather well for black here, because black has managed to exchange all the pawns on the queen side. So play is now really limited to the king side, but the problems for black here is that are purely tactical. For example, if black here goes knight e8, then rook d8, queen d8, queen a1 check, king g2, queen e5, queen e8 check, king h7, queen f7. This is endgame which Kasparov also got in the game. But queen a4 should have been played, and after queen b6, queen a3, rook d1, probably best is knight f5, and then after check, knight take f7. Here there's queen c1 check, king g2, and now queen b2. And this move gives black enough counterplay. White actually keeps an advantage here, but the threat of knight take e3 is what white now has to deal with first, and queen h8 check, king g6 does not really give anything. So it's a long forced line, and then white keeps some advantage, but it's of course an extremely difficult decision to play here the move queen take a4. It's because it could easily lose, and definitely it's move 31. I don't know how much time both players had on the clock, but you just want to keep it all under control, and queen take a4 does not achieve that at all. But knight take a4 should have lost. Rook c8, knight c8, and now here Kasparov has played a perfect game so far, but here he missed the move queen b5. Probably also this move was missed by Karpov. The point is that after knight d6, queen c6, the knight does not really have anywhere good to go, and after knight moves again, then we give a check on e8 and take on f7. And that position is just winning, since black has no counterplay. So queen b5 would have given Kasparov already the win, I think. Black's best defense is king h7. and then knight c6, queen a8, queen d3 check, f5, queen d8, and well, all in all, the thing is that black's position is just very difficult to hold. The threat is now 97, and that would result in mate. So just a very, very difficult hold. I have analyzed this a bit deeper, and that leads to a win for white, but queen b5 was not played in this game. Instead, queen d1 was played, and after this move, Karpov is back in the game if he played here the move knight c5. This would have just resulted in a position which is equal. For example, queen d8, king h7, and what probably was missed by Kasparov is that after queen takes c8, queen a1, king g2, queen e5, he's just a pawn down. Maybe he didn't miss that. Maybe there's something else that he missed. For example, king g2 is a possible move, but then black can play f6, and after queen c8, fe5. This is not that special. Well, knight c6, queen d7. Also here, black seems to be just completely fine. So yeah, it was a very important moment in the match. Knight c5 probably would have given Karpov back the world title in 1987, but instead he went knight e7, and after that queen d8, king h7, knight take f7. His position was just very difficult to hold, and he lost it in the end. I will very quickly show you the remaining moves because the game lasted 100 moves, something close to that. Queen e8, queen e7, queen a4, and now bishop e4, and this pin is very unpleasant. So king g8, and now queen b5, knight f8, and queen b6. So white now has this extra pawn. Of course, position is maybe not lost yet, but I think white can try this forever, and yeah, they are playing also without increments, so I guess that what Kasparov has to do is just try to slowly burn the time of the opponent, and then try to strike somewhat somewhere when both players have not so much time on the clock anymore. And well, there was a lot of maneuvering, and Kasparov tried to slowly improve his position, h4, and well, maybe if the position was still a draw, it's not anymore after the next move, which was h5, because the pawns became just very vulnerable on the light squares. He should have retained his option of going g5. I think that was the best structure that Karpov could choose in this position, but now after queen c6, queen e7, bishop d3, and e4, king g8. So king g8. Already the exchange of queens was winning for white. White is bringing the king now in the game. Bishop d5, and there's not so much black can do against white bringing the king up. And then at some moments black will be forced to take on f4, and after that white's e-pawn is going to decide the game. So king g8, no queen exchange, bishop d5, queen a7, and now queen b4, and e5, So white's queen has made it to f7, and now position looks even worse. There's nothing black can do anymore except for wait. Queen c8. So king c2. Actually, not 100 moves. Actually, here already Karpov resigned, since looks like he's in some kind of a zugzwang. So very very long video, because this game was very important for chess history. Karpov could have gotten back his world title, and I think brilliant decision by Kasparov to go for double fianchetto here and choose something which is not too theoretical. Try to keep as many pieces on the board and try to sharpen the game only somewhat around move 25, move 30. It worked out perfectly in this game.